Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. And it's a pleasure to talk to you also. Uh, just to introduce myself, I've been doing Chinese medicine for about 25 years or so. I started in the conventional way to study TCM, and then I found out that there's classics, there's like another style that you can study more the classics, but since I couldn't speak Chinese, it didn't really mean much, so I had to learn Chinese. I traveled around the world. I lived in New Zealand, and then I moved to Germany. I started studying Chinese in the university there, but the pace was way, way too slow, and I realized I will never ever be able to learn real good Chinese. So I started traveling to China back and forth many times, and I lived there several times for an extended period of times. And then I started doing what we would call today classical Chinese medicine. In other words, researching the Huangdi Neijing, Shanghan Lun, Jingui Yao Lu, try to memorize them, write them, copy them, old fashioned, like we heard traditionalists do. You need to memorize the text. But, I always had kind of when I was a child, my father, my late used to say, you're non-conforming, you're always rebelling, you always don't do what people tell you. So actually, I think all my life is like this. I was learning the classics, and I learned that I have to do what people say, meaning not just the teacher right now, but what Zhang Zhongjing said, what the Neijing said. Like, you have to be compliant. You have to do what people tell you. In other words, you have to copy and do what others did. You can't really have your own thing. But this always bothered me. I had few teachers in the past, some of them very famous today. At the time, they were not famous when they were my teachers. But I remember talking to them, asked them critical questions. What does this mean? Why is that? Like many of us do in Chinese medicine. Why is it? And I always found kind of many closed doors, not necessarily because they didn't want to answer. It's just because there are no answers. It's not like we want to hide from you. It's really to try to ponder all kind of very difficult questions.
Can you give us an example of one of those questions? What was the type of question that you were looking for those sort of answers from?
For example, I use always the same example, but let me just use it again. When I studied Shanghanlun, memorizing it and copying it, there's description of the diseases. What is Yangming disease? What is Taiyin disease? What is Shaoyin disease? And I remember asking the teacher, but what's Yangming? He said, yeah, Yangming means you sweat a lot, there's a big pulse, constipation, whatever the Shanghanlun says the symptoms are, this is the disease. So I rephrased the question. I said, no, not what's Yangming disease. What is Yangming? And then say, well, Yangming, the name is bright young. And I said, what the hell is bright young? Like, what does it mean? There's no answers. And I'm not just talking about contemporary teachers, but rather when I researched the commentators of the classics throughout history, I'm looking for these answers, and there's a lot of dancing around, but there's no real answers that you can resonate with, and you say, wow, clear. It's very clear. It's always it's just because, that's the feel. It's just because you're not enlightened. That's why you don't know. I can't really explain it to you.
It sounds to me like what you were discovering was that it felt like there was a hierarchy, that only the privileged were allowed to be part of this privileged body of knowledge, but then behind there was no substance to it.
Well, again, it's just my nature to be kind of rebellious and skeptic. But I really love Chinese medicine. So you have many skeptics of Chinese medicine that don't really know anything about Chinese medicine. They just think it's bogus. Thousands of years of Chinese medicine and nobody knew anything. So these are the regular modern skeptics. I just don't believe in Chinese medicine. But for me, it was different because I was completely entrenched in Chinese medicine, but being skeptic in order to try to find out what's true, what's not. Because when I learned the classics, people tell me, look, everyone was enlightened if they lived 100 years earlier or before. And I'm thinking about it. Is it possible? It's like literature. Is it possible that every single person is enlightened, not one mistake? And if it is possible, how come they're all fighting with each other, saying opposite things? It couldn't be that everybody is right if they say exactly the opposite thing. Someone must be wrong. So this was like, still I'm introducing myself. What kind of style of thinking am I having? It's not to criticize the classic. It's a kind of a skeptic, but skeptic in order to try to find out what is truth, what is not. Because at the end, we're practicing medicine, not philosophy.
And
In
that
other
also sounds
words,
to me like the framework in which you're applying is really just a researcher's framework. That you have a question, you test out the hypotheses, and you look at throwing out all the perhaps non-significant variables that are going to bring you to an outcome. So it sounds like you're intrinsically a researcher at heart, and that process of applying research model to the Chinese medicine framework, perhaps.
I agree with that statement. But there are, I think, throughout history, there were many, many people that were researchers or learners or copiers, And I just belong to that group that I like to question it and I want to find out what's right, what's wrong. And I was just start to saying before that it is because we're not only philosophers, or should be doctors or practitioners. In other words, if I have some sort of philosophy and there's a little thing bogus in it, and then I transmit it into a treatment, it actually hurts people. Whereas if I was just a philosopher in classroom, it doesn't really matter. You don't hurt people so much. But that's where the responsibility feeling come from. Like you have to be real. You have to go to the bottom of things. You can't just say, well, because it has been practiced for 2,000 years, it must be real. That's my testimony. I find it inadequate.
And so in practical terms, and this is what's intrigued me, and certainly why I made contact with you recently, in order to organise this interview, is that, I'm in contact with a lot of practitioners from all over the place, and around the same time, a lot of people contacted me and said, have you talked to Dr. Yaron Seidman about his approach, because it's so revolutionary, it's so contemporary, it's so different to the classics of Chinese medicine as we learnt in school, and that really intrigues me, because you've obviously had a huge influence over a group of practitioners who are ready for a new way of understanding Chinese medicine, and that's what I would love to hear from you. Is what is this new way of understanding? What other divergences or insights do you have about what we as practitioners would understand Chinese medicine to be?
Well, the question is right on, and the truth is that the answers could be very extensive, like a very, very big answers from very different angle, and I'm just trying to summarize it quickly in an interview fashion and say, first of all, we believe that in Chinese medicine there is a lot of gold nuggets. There's a lot of good pieces of information to be found. It requires sifting through the materials and the logic to try to find out what's good. The other aspect to what I'm trying to accomplish here is how to make our medicine beneficial in the 21st century. So whereas modern medicine, drugs and things like that, or physical medicine, which I call square medicine, meaning medicine of the physical body, physicality, is extremely developed, and yet the talk or understanding about what life is, which I would call circle medicine, like the circle principle, is very underdeveloped. I also call it like we still didn't find the beginning of the circle, like where the circle starts, nobody really knows. But I think if we wanted to take in the history of Chinese medicine, the gold nuggets is actually this piece is talking about what does it mean to be alive, how are we connected to nature, to heaven that creates life. And this is in a nutshell. What am I aiming for is first using Chinese medicine, the classics, all the sages and the enlightened people that were, and that it was not everybody, and then try to find out of them what kind of meditation, contemplation did they have into the issue of being alive, not into the physicality. So what happened in the 20th century, and I wrote an extensive book about it with two of my colleagues, Louis and Zach, about what happened to Chinese medicine in the 20th century. I'm just mentioning it here for a moment.
And this, of course, is your book, The Liberation of Chinese Medicine.
Into a very physical.
Excuse me. I'm just going to repeat that again, just because you seem to have dropped out. I'm going to turn my video off, and that should help with our internet connectivity. I won't be a moment. There we go.
Are we still there?
Yes. So you just you just dropped out for a moment when I had just introduced your book, which was the Liberation of Chinese Medicine.
You introduced it. I didn't hear any of it. Your picture was frozen to me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've just turned my video off as well. So if I just introduce you again, so Dr. Seidman, that was your book, The Liberation of Chinese Medicine.
Sure. Oh, so you just showed it? I can't see you anymore, but you just showed
Yeah,
my book?
I've turned my video off just so it supports our better internet connectivity. I'm sorry about the break in the conversation there.
Yeah, no, no problem. Considering that you are on an island, it's very exciting actually to have internet at all.
You do. So so
But
so
but in a word, this book that we wrote, Chinese Medicine Liberation, is just to show in as much as possible an objective way, translating documents from the time, 1920s, 30s, 50s, 70s, what happened to Chinese medicine to become so materialistic or square medicine, physical like logic. And I think that it was good in the 20th century to survive as a medicine, but in the 21st century, there's a different space for Chinese medicine, and this is what I'm trying to create, like this kind of life medicine, life principle. And it's not necessarily that I'm making it up, but rather I'm trying to reintroduce these parts of Chinese medicine that talk about a life. So when I see a patient, it actually opening for the patient a different space. Like they go to the square medicine, all the physical logic of medicine, there's plenty of this, and it's very developed and very advanced, but it's only that space, and I'm trying to give them what we would call an alternative, another option, meaning a different kind of logic, different kind of healing method, and this is
and
where.
how in practical terms does this play out in say for example a consultation with a patient? How does your approach differ to move away from that the square medicine approach to the circle medicine approach?
Well, it's interesting because I'm teaching my fellows when they learn HunYuan medicine. I said when a patient comes into the clinic, the first thing that you see is a circle. That's to your question, how is it different than square medicine? In other words, a circle has many, many meanings. And again, it's a very extensive topic. To introduce it here exhaustively is a little difficult. But generally speaking, a circle means the body's ability to connect on time, in timeliness, with nature's cyclical motions. So it does not talk about the body as the only thing, but rather it says you have a physical body, but you have to be harmonizing with nature in a cyclical way, not in a materialistic square way. In other words, when the morning comes up, you have to wake up. The nights come in, you have to come in yourself and go to sleep. In other words, in order to live healthy and long life, there are a few different things that need to be accomplished, but the first thing is that we need to harmonize with nature's cyclical motion. So when we start seeing physical diseases like back pain, headache, the eye is red, I feel nauseous, the analysis of the situation is not anymore physical. Do you have stomach yin deficiency? But rather it's a timely analysis, meaning is your yang ming, which has also the stomach and the mouth, are they moving on time, synchronizing with nature or not? If they're moving too fast or too slow, this is when you start seeing symptoms like I feel nauseous, I feel bloated, I have mouth sores, etc., etc. So in other words, the diagnosis in the clinic, seeing symptoms does not translate into a square materialistic view of a disease. Even if we say, let's say, liver qi stagnation, where it seems like we're talking about energy, but actually it has a materialistic logic to it. Like there's energy like electricity and it's not moving. This is the transformation of the 20th century, meaning of Chinese medicine. It's not that these are new. These logics were actually 2,000 years ago. They are very old. In the 20th century, they were just selected as appropriate to match Western science. It's not that they invented them. So therefore, when you study modern Chinese medicine today, you can see the reference from 2,000 years ago. It's not that they invented it, but rather it was subjected to a selection process. And actually, throughout history, different dynasties, different political situation, and so forth, Chinese medicine was always subjected to a kind of selection. This fits, this doesn't fit. But I think in the 21st century, the proper selection for Chinese medicine, or reintroducing things from the ancient Chinese medicine, is those that talk about the circle, or my connection to nature, harmony, These are all also very ancient ideas that on purpose were dropped out as superstitious, inappropriate for modern science, not scientific, in other words, not square, not
Indeed.
physical.
And so following on from that, I would love to hear your view on the Shen and how that fits in. And it's my observation as we do become more scientific as a model that we are in danger of losing Qi and the Shen as part of our platform for understanding health and disease. So perhaps you could share with us your just understanding of what the Shen in our medicine means.
Well, I cannot tell you what Shen means for our medicine as far as many people are thinking, because each one has his own opinion as far as what spirit is and so forth. But I can share with you what I think about it. And again, it's not necessarily that I invented it, but rather I follow a certain trend. And that could be traced back easily if it's from the Huaishan school, Liu Yuan and this people from about 200 years ago from the Qing dynasty. But this understanding of what right now you ask me about Shen, or the spirit, that aspect of the person, in HunYuan medicine is actually a very big department. And it's not just a name, like you have spirit, your spirit is good or something, but rather it has a whole aspect of the medicine. You mentioned before the ledger of good and evil, and it's that department. We call it the Shin Fa department, or the heart method department. And specifically, if I would try to explain what spirit is, as I understand it, of course, is not anything that is ingraspable, unattainable, but rather it's what's inside the heart, which we lose at birth, or we lose connection with birth. We don't stop realizing it. In my language, we call it the true nature of the person, or the inner heart. In the Qing dynasty, they used to call it the Tao heart versus the human heart. So, meaning after we come into the world, we are born, the heart has to change from a state of unity. Like the baby, the infant is in unity with its mother. It is alive, but it does not need to breathe and eat and have desires of any sort, because everything comes automatically through the umbilical cord. But the heart, or the external heart, what we call the human heart, has to go into a dichotomy state to start having desires, likes and dislikes, so the baby can start breathing in nature and be hungry and eat and take energy from nature and so forth and so forth. This is the difference we make between the Tao heart, or the inner heart, and the outer heart, or the human heart. And so when we talk about spirit in HunYuan medicine, we're actually talking about finding again, or rediscovering. It's not that it's not there, but we need to rediscover this inside heart. We call it also the infant, the unborn infant heart, which feels and recognizes this unity that we have with heaven. We feel in HunYuan medicine that life is not really created at conception, but rather life has to be carried from the father and the mother throughout many, many generations. And in fact, we say it comes all the way through from the creation of heaven. It's a constant line. We call it one thread of life. And this is what the infant heart gets in the center before the human heart changes into a dichotomy. So when you ask me, what do you think spirit is? We're talking about this inner connection, the inner heart, that is actually heaven principle inside the heart, connected. This is how we view the spirit in the heart. And so it's not a religious spirit. It's not something that, I'm not sure what it is. It's, it's spirit. But we have a definition for it, which is the life carried throughout the generation, which belongs not to us. It belongs to heaven at creation from whatever 5 million years. And it has to propagate through the generation. And it's unlike the heart that we normally recognize, the dichotomy heart of emotions and desires. I like it, I don't like it. The I like it and don't like it human heart is an essential instrument we have to have, otherwise we can't exist. We call it the warrior. It protects our life. It tells us you're hungry, you need food, you need to breathe, otherwise there's no energy. It helps our vessel, our physical body, which is a vessel, be able to connect to nature constantly in different ways. We call it the vertical and horizontal connections, meaning be able to go to sleep and make a certain connection with nature, and also have physical engagements with nature every day, with food, with water, with air, which then further expand, of course, also to social engagements, me and other people, me and the tree, me and my dog, and so forth. But the heart instrument is very, very important. Actually, this is what allows the physical vessel to be alive. But without the spirit, meaning the Tao heart, this life that is transmitted throughout the generation inside the dichotomy, what we call Xing, or true nature. It's a Taoist, Buddhist, Confucian, all of them use this concept in different ways. This is what we call spirit. In other words, we start to meditate and contemplate on it. What is it beyond just a name? Spirit. It's like, something from Hollywood, some spirits and this. But we have
And
this kind of definition.
My next question then is, and I thank you so much for that really clear description, because it's so obvious that, as you say, the Tao heart and the human heart, and perhaps the conflict that sometimes occurs between those. And my question for you then is how do you perceive health within that framework of the Tao heart and the human heart, or ill health? What would be your definition of ill health?
Yeah, it's funny because yesterday or the day before, I gave a lecture at a very big, huge IVF clinic in New York City, and two patients, and one of the patients asked me this question similar to yours, or she said, I heard that many IVF doctors think that health is not related to the health of the egg, if I agree with that or not. But the question is similar to your question here. And there are two kinds of health. One is what we call number 2, and I don't have anywhere to draw, but if I had an ability to draw here like a whiteboard, I would draw a circle, and I would say which is from the bottom left all the way around the circle to the bottom right, the entire physical body, unfolding of unification and separation, meaning all the different processes of the body, waking up, reaching to an apple, taking the apple, digesting it, taking the energy from it. These are called the physical processes of unification and separation in HunYuan medicine. This all belongs to number 2, and their principle is to be on time and in harmony with nature. In other words, when the body is on time, you don't have pains and aches. If you eat and the digestion happens exactly in the right speed that it should happen, digestion is great. If the digestion starts to be slow, you start feeling bloated. Maybe if it runs too fast, you start having diarrhea. In other words, if it's not on time in the body, you start feeling ill. This is one concept of health, which means the body is not on time or not proper. Its actions are not proper. It's not harmonious. But the second and more important question is, how do we keep life going? And this is a different kind of a question. We call it number 1. And it has to do with the very bottom of the circle. So not the entire circle, but rather just the bottom of the circle, which we call recharging or unification, meaning all the energy that I take from nature, the sleep that I do at night, and all the other activities, breathing and so forth. At the end, this energy needs to be converted to become mine. So in other words, if I eat apples and a chicken and a fish, you look at me tomorrow or later today, there's no way for you to tell what I ate. I'm not starting to talk like a chicken. I'm not walking like an apple. The food, the material that I took, I break it, and most of it goes in the bathroom. I don't use it anymore. But the life from it, I take the life and it's being converted to become mine. This is called unification or recharging. In other words, if we stop the air from coming into the body, we only have 2-3 minutes of our own, without any connection to nature. But if I keep on breathing and making this connection all the time, take air, take the energy from it, make it mine. Take air, take the energy from it, make it mine. Over and over and over. It looks like there's another 2 minutes, another 2 minutes, another day, another year. All of a sudden it looks like I have many years, but they're actually always, because I was able to take energy from nature, make certain connections, convert it to become mine, and then it's my life. It's not an apple anymore. It's not a chicken. This all belongs for us in HunYuan medicine at the bottom of the circle, meaning the ability to convert energy to become mine. So a child who is 5-year-old and an old person who is 90-year-old, they could eat the same apple. The apple has the same amount of calories or whatever you want to describe, but the child takes from it and he has a lot of energy converted to become his own, let's say 5 ounces. The old person take the same apple and he actually convert only half an ounce of energy to become his own. That's why they eat the same amount of calories, but the old person already has no more energy. He's very tired. He works very slowly. He can't jump like a little kid anymore, no matter what, no matter if he eats 10 times more than the child. This is what we're after in HunYuan medicine, and this is the second more important concept of health. What does it mean to be healthy? It means that your ability to recharge is strong. So you have many more cycles to go, many more days, many more years. This is where I answered also this other patient. This is where actually health is very critical for egg quality, for example, or for any other diseases for that matter. So if I have a patient now that has an RA or rheumatoid arthritis that no doctor could heal, and they change drugs on her many times, and she's at the end of it. And she's been taking herbs for 9 months now, and for a few months she's already off the drugs completely. And she comes a few days ago, I saw her, and she's like, yeah, this week my finger hurt a little bit. Like 9 months ago, she couldn't move, she couldn't close the finger. You know, she was in a very, very bad shape. And we're like having jokes on it. This is not for making the body on time. That kind of medicine can't reach this thing. But rather making the recharging ability strong, you actually make the person, I don't want to say younger because this is already a cliche. People, anti-aging medicine, it's not that kind of thing. But rather you increase the recharging ability of the person, then miraculously you can see many diseases getting better.
And so my final question for you then, and thank you again for taking us through the different philosophical frameworks which sort of underpin the HunYuan philosophy, or the HunYuan approach, if that's a better expression.
Sure.
And so my final question for you then is, how do you see HunYuan medicine influencing acupuncturists around the world today? What would you like your vision to be of where this medicine ends up?
Well, the truth is, I don't have big dreams or any dreams. When I learn Liu Yuan, I'm translating now one of his books and commenting on it. He's like, you just need to do your thing with devotion and dedication. If it's small, if it's big, it doesn't really matter. You did what we call the complete heart. So it's not like if I become a HunYuan medicine becomes famous and rich and this. It's rather you do the thing that you believe in it the most with a complete heart. If many people get to it, that's great. If 5 people get to it, it's the same great. It's not less. It's not the more the better, the more famous the better. But you always have this desire in the heart that if you believe in something and you think that it's good, that this goodness will propagate and will become more and more available. So at the end, there is no disappointment if it's only 100 practitioners or 200, like a few hundred that it is today, or if it is many, many thousands. There's only just this hope that, if it is good, if it has merit, and it's not just my imagination, if it really has merit in the world to be something that really can deliver goodness, that it will promote more goodness to more people. This is like the only genuine hope that someone can have in the heart, but it's not really high aspiration for it to succeed of any sort. It's like everyone does his little thing the best that he can with the most devotion that he can, and then when we reach the end of life, it's like your job is complete. You did to the fullest of your heart. This is where I'm coming from. It's not really a physical aspiration. Where do I want it to go? I just want to do the best I can, devote the best I can, and everybody that can do the same to help their patients, I think this is good. If you judge by history, there were many times, I don't know, even if it's like Mozart and the other guy, sometimes people, during their life, they're not destined to be big, but future will tell. Whatever has merit, survive. Whatever doesn't have merits, disappear. So this is, I think this is my real hope, is like you do things with the utmost devotion. And then whatever merit you were able to accomplish, if it is worthy, it should continue. If it's not worthy, it's still good. You did your best and it should not continue. It's that kind of an attitude.
Well, certainly, again, in thanking you for being part of this interview today, that it was a couple of your very loyal students who had said to me it was important that we speak, and they were absolutely correct, and I do speak on their behalf to say thank you, and also that your influence, and we're talking people in Bellingen, Australia, different people in parts of Europe, so your reach is prolific and also very deep. So thank you again for setting time aside with us to share with the acupuncture professional community, and it's certainly I feel really privileged to hear from you, your vision, and your authenticity, and certainly look forward to sharing HunYuan medicine with our acupuncturists from around the world.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.